So how have you been? We're amplified.
It makes it hard to share the dirty details of our lives, doesn't it?
Yeah. Can't really tell me how you are. You know all those cold cases that
And,
came over to talk to us years ago?
Okay,
so
it
that's
kind of weighs.
been
Actually,
a
this is better.
success, right? They've gotten out there. A big book. It's a frontline project.
I think I didn't know you were from Boston.
Unresolved. The Unresolved.
Thank you. Hey, oh my gosh, this is so long. Can we take a photo?
That's great.
This is, I lived with her in the co-op in undergrad.
Uh-huh. Oh, good to know. That's great. Are you still in touch with Marisa Noble? Yeah. Cool. That's exciting. Wow. Are you going to explain? Yeah. So spatial justice based on the space where you're in. I just heard today someone talking about spatial violence. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Right. Out. Like pandemic. Raise funds, yeah, for sure, always. We're like not funding. Find funds for nothing. Because it's not, they don't
Never could believe the things you do to me.
augmented reality, and there isn't that much out there. So, like, in trying to imagine the future where a lot of this will be available, how do we make sure that A, our artists can continue to do this work, and B, that we find ways to get students and people able to try and use these technologies. So that's what I think about and working on. By like, we have a, you know, yeah, and also like, not just the technology, but the know-how, how to use it. And sort of yeah. Well, we should talk. We're working right now with AR platforms and getting people to use them, and like we're going to do an exhibit within our lab, but we want to go local and we want to work more with, you know, and do workshops. So maybe we could do a workshop with your people and they could be exposed to the technologies and start thinking about ways of telling stories with these, with their phones and VR. Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah, but you can do that with storytelling. Yeah, so we could. Yeah. Let's talk, and we could. You know, we have amazing fellows, and so like some of them maybe could come over with me or without. You know, I could organize it. Yeah. 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 Well, archives too is a big area for us. Yeah. Well, there's this amazing AR platform that one of our fellows developed, which is essentially like with murals on the wall. You know, on the wall, it takes you put this up, and you can animate those murals with videos and stuff. Yeah, so we could do something around that. I mean, I can show you a video. It's incredible. Like, this guy is brilliant. And he basically, like, he's in Oakland, and he's looking at the Black Panther history. And there's all these murals there. And then he's an archivist. So, well, he's a creative. He's in the archives. He has all this video from that. And he has this app where you can just literally, you know, put videos on the stills, and it looks like they're talking. You know, it just like integrates really well media with the murals, and it's a powerful tool.
You should be mic'd. It should be?
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Let's. Well, till mid-May, I'm working. We have a fellows week where they're coming mid-May, but after that, like the second half of May will be easier. Okay, so maybe early June. Yeah, June's a great month. June is a great month. Okay, yeah. Yeah. That would be amazing. Yeah. Yes. Okay, for sure. Yeah. Thank you. No, I'm happy that this is really of interest, so great. shouldn't drink wine. It goes right to my head. Do you work better with wine?
No, because I was just like so at the end. I was teaching and I was like meeting.
Yeah, thank you. This jacket goes well with my hair, I'm told. How are you doing?
You wanted to show me his office and I wanted to see, but I was like, now it's
After. Oh, I was going to go to yoga after too. Which one? You go to Harvard Square? Yeah, I know. I'm trying to decide. I have my yoga clothes with me. What? Yeah, it was 7. Okay, 7:30. This is only till 7. But there's also a dinner after. Oh, I don't know. I probably can't, but whatever. We'll start. Hey. I'm not sitting up there. I'm just going to stand and introduce people, right?
that's like for after.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Hi.
As ready as just wearing a hat.
Where is this dang thing?
You tell me when you want to begin, okay? I'm waiting for the red flag. So whenever you give me the, or green flag or whatever. Green light, that's the green light. Okay, hello everyone. It is great to see you here in person, and hello to those of you online that we cannot see but we can feel here in the Long Lounge. As we begin this conversation, and as a part of it, I invite us all to be mindful of the elders, relatives, and children of the Wampanoag Nation whose unceded territory MIT occupies, as we acknowledge on behalf of MIT the indigenous people as the traditional stewards of this land, as well as the enduring relationship that exists between them and their traditional territories. As you may know, MIT is one of Massachusetts State's land-grant universities and has, through the Morrill Act, received financial benefit from lands taken from indigenous people in other parts of the US as well. I acknowledge the painful history of genocide and forced occupation of indigenous peoples' territories, and I hope for these acknowledgements and invitations to mindfulness to point us towards important conversations and actions to follow. Now, some of you know who I am. I am Anna Milachki, professor of architecture at MIT, director of the Architecture and Urbanism program, as well as of the Critical Broadcasting Lab. I wear many hats here at MIT, and today I am going to introduce the event and serve as a kind of a steward of parts of it. But given the amazing dynamic people who are here, part of this project and the book and the event, probably my role is to move out of their way the best I can so they can talk. For my MIT friends, especially the current members of the Collective Architecture Studio, who I hope are somewhere online watching this, and the veterans of this studio. The themes of the book, design and solidarity, will be familiar, and thus my own investment in those clear. But for those of you who are less familiar with my own work on co-authoring, collectives, and repair, I want to put a few things in the room, if for no other reason than to sort of tell you why this hat maybe makes sense for tonight. And maybe some of those will come in the form of a glossary, repeating the glossary that Rafi and Marisa give us in the book. But that start with the childhood in socialist Yugoslavia. And it took me 30 years in the US context to actually learn to appreciate how very different my own values were from the prevailing values of this context, and to ultimately choose to articulate my alignment with some of them in the contemporary moment. And it's amazing what we can assume is normal and how long it can take to understand how disoriented we are as a result of values we carry as our baggage in a world organized at odds with them. So you might have read Arturo Escobar, who isn't here with us, but is with us online and in the book. But in his introduction to design for the Pluriverse, he speaks about a 30-year gestation period for some of the ideas and the work in the book. And I'm thinking there's still hope for me then as well. So part of this hard-earned self-awareness that I'm talking about, in my case, comes out of similarly contending with the imperatives to catch up with the West that very much defined the experience in the epistemological reality, or as Arturo would say, ontology of the Second World during and especially after the Cold War. And thus a deeply felt sense of another conception of the world, to which I think many contemporary activists operating on the territory of former Yugoslavia are now turning to as a vital source of alternatives and of an understanding that there are multiple possibilities out there. For them and for me, that is a kind of useful escape velocity from the naturalizing inertia of capitalist realism. In many ways, conversations in Yugoslavia on that territory, now contemporary ones, resonate with the topics of this little book, which I see as a generous tool for thinking and working with. Generous both in its tone and in its insistence on understanding the pragmatic implications of some of its key offerings on one end, and in its belief that by seeding a few clear political attitudes that inevitably link up to design, changes and even transition might reverberate and mount. In the book, Rafi and Marisa offer definitions for four key terms. They offer us design as the first term to consider and to define, and by it they encompass an interdisciplinary array of activities, including different scales of agency upon the world, with emphasis on the public sphere and the production of types of spatiality. They define solidarity as acts of alliance, building that may be capable of redistributing power, so requiring more commitment than the mere word alliance might suggest. Mutuality as a kind of interconnectedness with care or through care across different scales, sometimes micro and macroeconomic ones. And the commons, which in their definition means shared assets and imaginaries in need of stewardship and likely collective stewardship. Other words and terms and concepts make appearance in the book via their various interlocutors. And just a few that I want to include in the room for tonight are live and breathing networks, in opposition perhaps to the network theories that you, or certainly I know better. World or many worlds, the pluriverse, especially important with respect to the planetary ecological breakdown. Cooperatives, which in a way rely on the four terms that they give us in order to operate, but they also appear forcefully across a number of conversations in the book as a specific legal and material format for action and design, both realistic and hopeful in its capacity to engender alternatives. And In many ways, we arrive at the figure of the architect, activist, artist as a fixer, which, among many fixers, which brings us back to something we discussed 2 weeks ago in this room around the round table. But here in this kind of collection of essays and voices, on top of placing fragility and survivance at the center, the book also gives us tools to think of that figure as maybe many world weavers, to borrow again from Arturo, who don't just preserve life as it is, but channel it onward with a specific kind of renewed sense of politics and ethics. So that's my intro. And now we go on from here.
Thank you so much, Hannah. It's a pleasure to be here this evening. My name is Lindsay. I'm a senior fellow at the Future Urban Collectives Lab with Rafi. I've had the pleasure of being part of Open Collectives, the Venice Architecture Biennale Pavilion that Rafi and Marisa and Sarah Williams put together. I'm the fourth member of that collective. And I have a short contribution in the book as well. I hope you'll read my chapter where I explore in a bit of an oral history about the flowering of purely digital mutual aid collectives that began in the first days, weeks, months of the pandemic, starting in China, actually. Tricia Wang, who Marisa introduced me to, is an ethnographer and who was analyzing Wuhan and looking at how digital tools, text-based apps, and others quickly became the narrow tissue of how we started organizing in the face of a global pandemic, which was then, of course, unprecedented because until then, mutual aid collectives started face-to-face. They were localized and physicalized. So this sort of posed a fascinating discussion for designing for solidarity. How do we create those digital feedback loops, digital physical feedback loops to bind those communities together? And my chapter is a bit of a period piece now, looking back from those heady months in 2020, that paradise built in hell, to quote from Rebecca Solnit, but I hope you find it interesting. But it's my pleasure tonight to be a bit of a MC here for the first portion. I have 3 speakers we're going to invite up to give very short talks on how they are designing for solidarity. Our first speaker is Mercedes Bidart, who is the founder and CEO of Quipu. She was exhibited in the Open Collectives exhibition, The Station, at the Biennale. She is a graduate of MIT, an Argentinian who is working in Colombia with Quipu, which, as she will explain, is a fascinating platform that is basically sort of, basically creating a financialized platform to bind together people working in informal economies. So how do we create technology and create collectives and design for the solidarity of those who are unbanked, those who are left out of formal systems, and going from there? So with that, Mercedes, please, the floor is yours.
Awesome, thank you. I'm so excited to be here. Just to give you a little bit of background, I left the US when COVID kind of started to Colombia. I'm Argentinian, but I'm living in Colombia, and it's the first time that I'm coming back to MIT. So it's great to be here. It feels home, so thank you so much for the invitation. And another piece of background of what I will talk about is that if you read the chapter in the book, you will see that money is in the center, and it's still in the center of what I'm building, basically because it's one of the main pain points of families in emerging economy in a way, in emerging markets. And I will explain what we are doing now after 2 years, because from here I moved to Colombia to really, build it on the ground, to understand how our ideas were actually working in the communities. So it's been a long journey, and there were a lot of learnings, and I will try to summarize in these 5 minutes. So we are Quipu. We are a company based in Colombia, and we are doing inclusive digital finance for the whole region. So what we are doing now is basically a supply chain financing platform for informal businesses in Latin America. So I don't know if you've been to Latin America, but you will see that these micro businesses that are described as businesses that have less than 10 employees, more or less, they are the economic engine of the region. 9 out of 10 of MSME in the region are micro businesses. They are usually led by women. Tons of them are run from their homes. And there's a really big funding gap of more than $1 trillion. These are IDB numbers. And where we are starting, which is Colombia, there are more than 6 million of these micro-businesses, just 9 of them access formal credit. So they are completely excluded from the formal financial system, and this is a really big barrier for growth. So we've seen that these businesses, usually, as I said, they are hiding in plain sight because as they are in their homes, you cannot see them or really recognize them. They end up not becoming SME or not growing, and there are 3 main reasons for that. The first one is that they are offline. 8 out of 10 in Latin America are informal. This means they are not registered. This is not illegal. This informal is different. It means it's a different way of working, but it means that they are not registered or not paying taxes in a way. And the third one is that they are blacklisted or they have a bad report in the credit bureau as a person, but not usually as a business because it's invisible. So they're still underserved and they're excluded by the financial system, and they end up relying on what we call an informal lending or predatory lending. This is a $600 million industry just in Colombia, and it's violent, right? This means people just charging more than 400% annual interest rate, being violent, and they end up relying on this type of lending. So what we're doing is using artificial intelligence to build a different creditworthiness analysis with alternative data. And this means alternative data on how actually these communities are transacting with one another, and different types of data, and now I will tell you more on how we are building it. So we learned how to record data of these informal businesses. They were offline, so what we've done is a platform where they can upload their business, they can upload what they are selling, pictures, videos of their business, even if it is at home. They can say who is buying to them, how much they are selling, how that network is actually working, because this is mostly cash-based, so that's why there's not register of transactions in a way. So what they're doing is registering these transactions and how they are doing commerce locally, right? And based on that is that we transform that social capital into economic capital, building what we call a digital financial ID. This means now, with this ID, you can not just access a loan with us, but actually, if you're a migrant, for example, and you want to move to another country, now you can also start building that creditworthiness. So we are using AI to build our credit scoring. This is an alternative credit scoring. We are not looking at the credit bureau because, as I said, 90% of them are blacklisted, so that's why they cannot access formal credit. So we use video, we use NLP, voice. We use also open finance. This is something that is really new and used in Latin America to build this new scoring with which you can start building again your credit history and access not just our loans, which are for the business, but other bigger financial services. But what we discovered in all this process is that basically capital is not solving all the problems. Like we were, okay, they need capital to grow, we were giving that capital, but in the end, there are more problems attached, right? And one of them is that, being poor is very expensive. Like being poor means you access loans more expensive, but also because the interest rates are really high, because you are risky in a way, there's no information about you. But the other thing is that you are buying supplies super expensive because you cannot buy in bulk, you buy in like small quantities, or you need to go 3 times in a week to the city center, you spend time in transportation, this is not secure, and well, you spend time, which is money in the end, right? So what we started doing is a collective bargaining program in a way. So we started doing partnerships with suppliers, big suppliers, like PepsiCo, if you would, or Procter & Gamble, like that type of suppliers, where these micro-businesses were not buying from them directly. And we started negotiating prices. So now they not just have finance, we finance that purchase if they don't have enough capital, but what we do is offering those products at a wholesale price. And this is because we know how much of them are buying what, and then that's the way in which we can negotiate those prices. So in a nutshell, our program has 3 main things, which is designing financial services that are easy, fair, and alternative. This means alternative data to build a different credit score. These are rotative loans that start in $25, so it's a really small amount that they increase as they continue in growing their business. And the third one is that they can buy supplies at better prices. So the product is an app, and it's a chatbot on WhatsApp. I don't know how familiar you are with WhatsApp, but in all the Global South, we use WhatsApp. We don't use iMessage. And you can use it if you don't have data on your phone. If you are like in the rural areas, doesn't matter. You will always have WhatsApp for free, and everybody uses WhatsApp. So they can do the onboarding and apply to the loan, do the KYC, all the process also on WhatsApp. And this is a 15-minute process. Once they do it, I will show you a little bit how it looks like. This is the platform where you get in. There's a marketplace with all of them. They're digitized now in a marketplace. They can start uploading their transactions, pictures of them and their business. And that's basically, then they ask like how much they need. And that's basically how it looks like. You can download it afterwards. So what in the end we're doing is not just providing capital and trying to connect, and do this collective bargaining thing with suppliers. In the end, what we are trying to do is build a strong community where, if you read the chapter, you will see that at that point, because this was like 2 years ago, 2 years and a half ago, and I think my concept of community changed. Like at that point, I was thinking, okay, community it has to be connected with a physical space. But then I started to realize that we can build community in the digital space too, right? And I started to realize that it doesn't matter where in Colombia you are, in which these are public housing neighborhoods and informal settlements where we work. It doesn't matter in which public housing neighborhood you are in Colombia, you're basically facing similar struggles. So what we are trying to do is connect them, trying to see who is close to you or who's not close to you, but building this tribe is how we call them. We do it on WhatsApp too, on WhatsApp groups. And in a way, it's connecting business owners that are facing the same problems and trying to make them not just purchase to one another, but also come together to negotiate better prices and other stuff. So that's what our platform tries to do, is also increase their visibility to help them to sell more and see who is selling what close to you. There's no Yelp in this type of businesses, right? Like we don't know who's selling what and where, so this is what the marketplace tries to do. So we are all across Colombia. Most of our users are women. And yes, you can see we are like even on the most remote areas of the country. And here I just pull up, oh, okay, it's black, but I tried to pull up like a little bit of, how the iteration process works. When you try to build technology, to build solidarity and technology in a way. So it's been 2 years of really understanding what we could scale in a way, or where we could basically serve the needs of the people in the end, right? Because sometimes in the lab we have like many ideas, and then when we try to put it down, so this is basically a journey from 2021. So we started being a marketplace that displayed offers by proximity and allowed to use Quipu points as a discount, so people were using points to buy and sell to one another. And now we still have the marketplace, we still have the Quipu points, but in the end we understood that in this segment and with these families, we need to solve first their main pain problem, which is access to capital, right? And then we can start the conversation, right? So money needs to be in the center of the discussion to start thinking on other stuff, right? So that's basically what we are doing now, starting with that, and then starting to connect on broader ways of supporting those economies. And yeah, just to close here, I wanted to put my why of why I'm doing this. And it's basically because I noticed that banks are defining our future. Like what we're seeing now is because someone in the past took the decisions to invest in certain projects, and that's why we are facing the problems we have now. So I think that we need to shift on how the capital is flowing and where it's flowing. So at Quipu, we are a channel for capital to flow into sectors that have always been marginalized by the traditional economic system. And this is using, alternative ways of doing it, not the credit bureaus, which actually are not working, but other ways of making capital flow. So yeah, I just ended with some, so after, we've done all this, we were winners of the Gender and Artificial Intelligence Prize of the IDB. We won the Inclusive FinTech 50 and Fast Company recognition. I mean, it's like how we take all these conversations that are in the margins, to this center. Now we are collaborating with banks that I will never have imagined that they will be interested in what I'm doing. And it's like how we shifted and changed systems in a way. So that's the work I'm doing. And yeah, this is my information if you want to in contact. Thank you. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Mercedes. Mercedes and I were chatting beforehand. I've just been writing a report for UNDP looking at informal transportation around the world. And her work and some of the other work of the companies we profiled in that are all about basically establishing the worth of people that are never valued by formal systems. And all this incredible technical effort to actually establish the worth of those people so that that capital flows to them. So thank you so much, Mercedes, for that. Our next speaker is Rashin Fahandej, multimedia artist, immersive filmmaker. Too many projects to list, but I want to call it one. I think it's your most recent, or it's certainly the most recent established there. It's A Father's Lullaby from the Foster Biennial here at the ICA in Boston, which is described, of course, as co-creating ecosystems of care with communities, which I think it's common in her work in the sense of the piece itself focuses on the marginalized voices of incarcerated fathers who, in her work, sing lullabies, as the piece describes, and also share childhood memories as a way to be actually heard. But then also, her work specializes in subverting traditional sort of media and technological narratives so that, by working through these co-creation processes with communities, these voices are surfaced rather than part of the dominant stream. And so how do we use these technological tools to surface all of those voices? How do we actually use that to bind communities together to bring these people forth? So I'm not sure how much of your presentation is devoted to that, but that one really struck out to me as indicative of your work. So thank you so much, Rashin. Please come on up.
Thank you so much. Thank you. It is fundamental to be in contested spaces, but it's healing to be among like-minded people. So thank you so much for this book and also creating this space for us to gather together. I did have my note right here, and somehow I'm unable to open it again. Oh, I see. I put myself in airplane mode. I'm sorry. Let me just try to reload the note. Okay. So, what does it mean to design spaces for and of solidarity? And spaces can be designed to segregate, isolate, and enforce supervisions for private gain and authoritarian control. They can also be shaped to promote mutualism, self-determination, and democracy. So I wanted to start with this sort of beautiful, poetic, but fundamental question in the way that we think about building our society. And I wanted to start with that because what I have, sorry, I don't have on my, my name is Rashin Fahandej, and I'm a senior co-creation fellow at MIT Open Documentary Lab, and I also teach emerging and interactive media at Emerson College here in Boston. I wanted to bring these questions because I also think about the spaces that we create, that they are emotional and they are psychological. What does it mean to be able to use our tools and methodologies to reimagine creating alternative spaces of care and criticality across territories of differences, as it's also put in the book? And how can we co-create ecosystem of cares with communities, medias, and technologies towards systemic change? also in the world that we are constantly faced by systemic social forces that perpetuate by polarizational representation of our society and also divisive methodologies in our communities. So what I have been investing on is really kind of thinking about the ways that we can reimagine our social paradigms and redesign systems. And the fundamental question to that would be like how we need to change our processes, the way that we actually do things, not just the way that we imagine. The tools that we use and how we incorporate the tools, not just the way that we want the society to be envisioned. And because often, as we know, like the processes are not simply the neutral paths, but manifestation of the social and political forces that can perpetuate inequities. Sorry, I had 5 hours of teaching today before I come here, and amplify the same social forces that we aim to change. And in order to sort of address challenging social systems, especially as an artist, storyteller, and media maker, I have come to sort of define my artistic practice as art as ecosystem, a network of cross-institutional collaborations. Sorry, it's quite washed out here. With multiplicity of narratives that investigate social systems and animate public sites and online platforms. The creative process itself becomes the opportunity to collectively shift the dominant narratives around urgent social challenges. And community co-creation becomes a central methodology to democratize access to tool and technology and storytelling, again, to shift the power dynamics toward equity and justice. I'm sort of thinking about really sort of reflecting and re-critiquing the tools and technology, the processes, as we are sort of engaging with social justice system. And in this field, emerging media for my practice and technologies and co-creative processes become the tools and framework to disrupt these power dynamics, promote cross-sectors collaborations, centering and transformative power of personal stories. And it is in the act of storytelling that the personal political realities of race, gender, class, climate, justice are intersectional or become intersectional. And from that space of intertwined, holistic narrative, the art as ecosystem arises. So I wanted to bring you to one project that I've been working on. I have been doing many projects, but this is sort of the central core of my practice, sort of exploring all these ideas in it. And it has been, I started this work as an artist in residence with the city of Boston, as a research fellow at MIT Open Documentary Lab. And it's a collaboration between Federal Probation Office, Office of Returning Citizens, and a lot of different community organizations within the city. And in the past 5 years, as an assistant professor at Emerson College, it's also been a form of pedagogy at a school. So A Father's Lullaby. I'm sorry, these are like very washed out. It's not like that on my screen, but bear with me. The Father's Lullaby highlights the nurturing role of men in raising children and make visible the negative impact of their long-term sentencing on children, women, and lower-income communities. We explored the role of digital media, technology, and co-creation to create, again, new social structures. And the project utilizes poetic aesthetic. And again, these tools and co-creation as a way of addressing this. And I wanted to also refer to Collective Wisdom, which is a field report publication from MIT Open Doc Lab and Co-Creation Studios, and the way that it sort of defines what the co-creation means, that the project emerges from the process and evolves from and within the communities with people rather than being made for or about them, and allowing for cross-disciplinary and cross-organizational collaboration, and really kind of framing the work around who and how and why, and how can we interpret the world and seek to change it through this lens of equity and justice. So the process becomes important in a way that like how the actually creative process could become a giving and generous space and cultivate spaces for many people, multi-generational, to engage with these tools of a storytelling. And these are some of the examples of the program that I created when I was in residence with Mayor's Office at Blackstone community here at South End, Boston, and also like work that it's done intimately with the community members. This was the point of view of mothers raising Black and brown sons in the community. And then the result of that was this sort of immersive, multi-channel audiovisual installations. This was at Ars Electronica in Linz. And there are also interactive spaces, so you can come to the space, and the heart of the stories are actually the intimate connections that you make with the father's stories through the touch panels. So as long as you hold your touch, you will be able to hear their stories. And what you encounter is this sort of 26-minute poetic movement that they are based on the stories and also lullabies. But also thinking about how art space could become, this was at ICA that Craig mentioned here in Boston in 2019. And also thinking about how the experience itself could become a poetic movement. So everywhere the project goes, it collects stories and lullabies from the immediate community. It's a call to the entire community, not just those who are impacted by the issue, but through that a space of love and intimacy and care, how do we think about this really challenging social issue in the United States? There are all different forms of engagement, from sound installations. I'm sorry, I don't know why these are. In the public spaces that you don't know it is art, but you encounter it and you experience it. There are also like kind of taking the art to the public through shipping containers, and there is always the element of participation, interaction. So there is an intention of witnessing of the stories, and also like you're able to share your lullabies and memories as well through the story. But one of the fundamental ways that I've been able to actually sustainably engage the community and fathers is through my pedagogy at Emerson College. This is the 5th semester I'm teaching, and one of my students is here as well, that the fathers, probation officers, come to the classroom with the students generally from 3 different departments. And the idea is that we are no longer make documentaries with subjects, but we are co-creators in the process. And the fathers learn to work with 360 camera, VR, emerging technology, and along the way they work with their children. So that tools become this sort of transcending space of creation and creativity. And most of the fathers' challenge is actually making connection with their children because of the lack of the time and the history that they've been sharing together. So this is our 1st semester, and in the middle of the semester, it was pandemic, so you can see probation officers, fathers, students, all together working with 360 camera, experiencing traveling while Black, and then we had to sort of shift to online. So I have taught class that we were totally remote with a student on campus and fathers checking out equipment from Federal Probation Office and working with their children at home and joining the class weekly, sort of again like collaborating and really thinking about how the tools could become these transcending spaces to move beyond the trauma and connect across the differences. Like if you think about the power dynamic between probation officers and fathers, but then they come together and use their shared emotional connection as a father to start connecting with each other in a different way. And I know, and I acknowledge that it's a temporal space, but despite the temporality, it creates a form of memory, alternative memory, an emotional connection that I hope that it will sort of resonate and manifest throughout their life. So these are some of the work that is created, from 360 videos to AR projects, and this semester we are doing volumetric filmmaking, so we are able to actually bring the fathers and the students, children to the classroom physically. So it's been really kind of an interesting space to think about it. And I want to sort of maybe end it with this 3D scan that one of the fathers did from his barbershop here in Lowell. Sorry, it's laggy, as is technology. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Rashin. I particularly love the final image of this because just before this, I was over at the Media Lab attending a talk on the metaverse. What is it? What is it for? With Jahn Lanier and several other speakers. And yes, these are the kinds of uses to put forth to imagine these worlds versus just another place to sell things. So thank you so much. Our final speaker in this block, again, Jules Rochelle, is a woman after my own heart in the sense of she has too many affiliations and too many titles to even begin to sum up. I love collecting those, and so I will just mention a few. She's the creative director at the New Law Lab at Northeastern's School of Law, and she is currently placemaking policy fellow at Arizona State. But what I hope she will talk about in her work at sort of the intersection of art and activism is really the platform she has built. She has multiple organizations that she has created, your Social Design Collective, SPAN, the Social Practice and Art Network, and the New Law Lab itself, which I thought was fascinating in the sense that it uses basically community co-design, simulation in a way, and games to prepare people to represent themselves in court. So how do we actually design practices, and how do we design networks and collectives to scale these kinds of efforts? So thank you so much, Jules. I can't wait to hear this, because you rarely hear artists talk about how they create platforms for artists. So please, Jules, come on up.
Okay, I don't have any slides today, so we're just going to do the lightning talk with my mouth. So thank you so much for inviting me into this space. And what I'm going to talk about today is really the work that we've done over 10 years at New Law Lab. So I'm here with my colleague, Dan Jackson. He and I have been working together for 10 years at Northeastern University School of Law. I'm trained as a socially engaged artist, and Dan is a lawyer. So we came together in 2013. That's also, like, we also met Marisa around that time, another artist that really believes in this sort of intersection between, I think, like, how do we actually transform society? Yes, it takes stories, but also we transform society through policy and law. At the lab, we believe that in the power, the transformative power that artists have in bringing people together, to tell those stories, to begin to shift narrative. But we also believe that we need the law to be able to do the deep transformational work that needs to be done in society. And so in our last 10 years, we've worked with a number of different artists. Yes, we've worked with Marisa. We worked with Rafi, or our law students have worked with Rafi. We've worked with Sarah Knaus. We have done work with game design to discover new ways to support people that try to navigate court systems on their own without lawyers, to create that level of access through technology, through that particular platform. In our most recent work, we've been working for about, moving towards six years now in the space of housing justice, where we've we began working on a project called Stable Ground, and we created, at the law school, we created a residency platform for several artists to come and work with us in the space of housing justice, artists that had deep connections to city life, or Dot Not for Sale, or in Roxbury, that kind of do deep work within the community using their creative skills to shift narrative or to bring people together, but we wanted to bring those folks closer to the law so that creativity could inform the law, inform lawyers to transform the way lawyers work, right? And the way law students think about the work that they can bring into community. With Stable Ground, of course, like all of us, we were impacted greatly by the pandemic, so our work really shifted towards more of a solidarity, mutual aid in the space. Many courts shut down. People were getting evicted. People were losing their jobs. We all know what that looked like. It happened in every city across America, the huge inequities that we have been experiencing for all of my life and beyond that, surfaced in an extreme way. So with the lab and our community partners at Maverick Landing Community Services, working with artists like Anthony Romero and Gabby Cartianga from City Life, we set up a makeshift rental relief program that brought about $1 million back into the hands of community members so they could pay their rent. We worked to feed people. We set up a number of clinics. We worked to set up technology platforms to allow people to find ways to get graft. A lot of the people that were trying to support their families were teenagers, trying to navigate the legal system, right? So the things that we were doing kind of tried to create an entry point to assist those individuals. And we made art along the way. We were doing printmaking, T-shirts. It's what brought people together in this time of crisis. People need joy. People need places where they can tell their stories, right? So that work now is becoming something different. It shifted, and now we, at the law school, we're amazed that we were able to get a National Endowment for the Arts grant to set up a 2-year research project to figure out, 2-year-long research project to figure out, how do artists and the work that they do in community, what creates the stickiness? How does that relate to social cohesion? How does that help people come together during times of crisis? So we set up a new project called the East Boston Spatial Justice Lab. We're launching it in May. We want to work with artists that want to build narrative, that want to tell community story. We value that type of work. We welcome that type of work in the field of law, in legal education, and it's something I feel like we really need. So I don't have slides, but I want to work with artists that want to tell stories and build narratives. I feel like that has the impact to shift society, and hit me up with some questions, because I'm looking for some artists to work with through the next 2 years. So I don't have a deck, but I wanted to let you know, the experience that our lab had with Marisa in 2013 really helped to lay the foundation for how we work. We wanted to bring somebody in so we could figure out how to build our curriculum. So that experience led us to, now we have a certificate in legal design. And what that means is that our law students take art and design classes. We're the only law school in America that supports law students in taking data visualization, or a storytelling class, or a video class, or a theater class. So I think some of the ways, I just wanted to mention that Marisa really helped us define ourselves and to build out that curriculum. And so let's hear more about their work. And thank you for your time. I really appreciate it.
Hello, I am Sarah Wallison. I'm the director of the MIT Open Documentary Lab. In our lab, we design story experiences. We study and incubate new forms of storytelling using new and old technologies. Rashin is one of our fellows. It's a perfect example of the kind of work that we do. And we have a co-creation studio, as she mentioned, that really looks at beyond this singular authorial vision of storytelling. We have other projects. We have someone from Oakland who is looking at the Black Panthers mural, and he's taking archives of the Black Panthers, and he's created a tool to augment the murals so that they're animated, and he's really bringing those archives into the streets, and it's really has this vision for people being able to just take their archives or what have you and animate them. We have someone else, an Iranian woman, who's looking at generative AI and how it can be a tool. So we're really looking at not only who is telling stories, but how. And from within communities and with communities and across disciplines and across organizations and with AI tools, which really resonates with your book, Design in Solidarity. So we're trying also, to ask these fundamental questions around who and how and why. In the book, they talk about design as dialogue, which really resonated. We think a lot about interactive documentary as a dialogue between people, or telling their stories to each other. There's a quote in here that I liked. Our imperative to design for, with, and through solidarity resituates with whom we work, how we work, and how we can design beyond capital-centric conventions. That's also something really important to us. In the documentary world, we're stuck with Netflix and streaming and algorithms that are curating. So we're sitting there really trying to keep documentary independent and public. And the book talks about the dialogical nature of design, solidarity, and practice. And we really see documentary as a dialogue. It's interactive, it's participatory, and it's a space for transformation. If you're participating in making documentaries, if you're not the subject, but you're actually creating with, it's a great space for transformation. So it's really an honor to be here and talk about your book and do introductions. So I am going to introduce Arturo Escobar. Is he coming in via Zoom? Anyway, as they're bringing him up, he is an activist researcher from Cali, Colombia, working on territorial struggles against extractivism, post-developmentalist and post-capitalist transitions, and ontological design. He was a professor of anthropology and political ecology at the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, until 2018, and is currently affiliated with PhD programs in design and creation, University of Caldas, Manizales, Colombia, and in environmental sciences, University of Valle, Cali. Over the past 25 years, he has worked closely with Afro-descendant environmental and feminist organizations in Colombia. His most well-known book is Encountering Development, The Making and Unmaking of the Third World. His most recent books are Designs for the Pluriverse, Radical Interdependence, Autonomy, and the Making of Worlds, and Pluriversal Politics, the Real and the Possible. Before he speaks, I'm also going to take this time to introduce Rafi, Segal, and Marisa, Jahn. Rafi is an architect and associate professor of architecture and urbanism at MIT, as most of you know. His work involves design and research on the architectural, urban, and regional scales, currently focused on how emerging notions of collectivity can impact the design of buildings and cities. His ongoing work includes designs for new communal neighborhoods in Israel, Rwanda, and the Philippines. Segal directs Future Urban Collectives, a new design research lab at MIT that explores the relation between digital platforms and physical communities, asking how architecture and urbanism can support and scale cohabitation, co-production, and coexistence. He has exhibited his work at venues including the Storefront for Art and Architecture, New York City, Kunstwerk Berlin, Witte de Wit, Rotterdam, Venice Biennale of Architecture, Museum of Modern Art, and Hong Kong Shenzhen Urbanism Biennale. He holds a PhD from Princeton University and a Master's of Science and a Bachelor of Architecture from Technion, Israel Institute of Technology. And the last person I'm going to introduce is Marisa, just to say she was a fellow with us at our lab. And she really stood out, not only because of her amazing artistic and aesthetic abilities, but really her ability to collaborate. She really knew how to work with people, how to honor them, how to bring out what they had, and it was really inspiring to watch how effective she was and what a good collaborator. So it makes sense that she's co-written this book. Where is her? Here it is. Sorry, bear with. So, Marisa Morán Jahn's art and films redistribute power, exemplifying the possibilities of art as social practice. Co-designed with youth, new immigrants, and working families, Jahn's work has engaged millions through venues such as the Tribeca Film Festival, Obama's White House, the United Nations, PBS, the New York Times, CNN, the BBC, goes on and on. Many places, big impact. Her key works include Biblio Bandido, a story-eating bandit whose fame in Honduras rivals Santa Claus. You can read about it in this book. 2 mobile studios, Nanny Van and Care Force One, and a Sundance-supported PBS film amplifying the voices of caregivers, and Care House, the U.S.'s first care-based co-housing project designed with architect Rafi, Segal. She has taught at Teachers College of Columbia University, MIT, that's her alma mater. Parsons, the New School, where she is the Director of Integrated Design. In 2022, she was a Sundance Fellow and an artist writer in residence at the Brooklyn Public Library and a senior researcher at MIT. So with that, I leave it to them.
Okay, it is my turn, I assume. Can you people hear me? Can you hear me well? Well, first, thanks so much to Marisa and Rafi for the invitation to be there. Thanks to Joel for technical support, to Sarah for the introduction, to the previous speakers as well, particularly Professor Anna Milashki. I'm sorry about pronouncing really badly her last name. I'm sure for her mentioning of the Science for the Pluriverse. And I really wish I could be there in person. I was all ready to go, but I got ill about 3 or 4 days ago, and I haven't been getting better soon enough to be able to be there. I really believe in the power of face-to-face presence, an embodied presence, and an embodied pedagogy. I think virtuality, especially for me, is a second-rate substitute of what we do in presence. And I think that's part of the theme of the book, the commitment to place-based, embodied kind of designs. Okay. And congratulations to Rafi and Marisa for this wonderful little book, deceptively little book. It really is a big book in what it does. And also because it is a very accomplished book, a very accomplished work. Then it is of the careful and creative editing and research on the parts of the 2 main editors, Marisa and Rafi. And what I like to do in my remarks, about 20 minutes, is to situate the book in the larger historical and philosophical context in which the rethinking of design that the book engages with, along with other works today in critical design studies, makes most sense to me. This is where the highest stakes are become visible. And the highest stakes for me in a book like this is the redesigning and rethinking the conditions for being human today. Perhaps we can talk about a new ontology of the human, a new way of being human. And hence new societies, new economies, new cities, especially those that are going to be able to enable us to face the polycrisis, the terricide, the climate collapse that is visiting upon the earth and most human beings. And I will divide my remarks into 2 parts. In the first part, I will make a general set of propositions about the dominant system that is causing the polycrisis. Bear with me, please. This is going to be more abstract than usual because of the time and because I'm not there. If I were there, I would probably do it in a different way, more pedagogically. and especially explain what I mean by this sort of capitalist modernity as an ontology that is the background to designing. And in the second, I will make some very brief remarks about 5 different aspects that I find very important in each one of the chapters, or in most of the chapters at least. And these threads are the following: solidarity and design, mutualism, solidarity and mutualism, local economies, spatial practices, referring to space, spatial practices, scale and the digital, and art and creation. Last but not least, obviously, as Rashin and Jules already mentioned, about the centrality of art, and also in Marisa's work. So to start with, design and solidarity to me is a twofold process. On the one hand is the design of solidarity, the design of spatial and social practices that are more communalizing and solidarity building on the one hand, but also on the other is the solidarity of design. Design as a practice of solidarity with subaltern communities, marginalized communities, at resisting, who are at the receiving end of the impact of modern capitalist technology and capitalism, including at the receiving end of design's participation in that whole system. And to take, this is not just linguistic play. And I think Rashin already read the part about, the book is about design for, with, and through solidarity. And it's a very important concept. It means to me that designing solidarity taken together speaks about the importance and of discovering the potential, the awesome potential of acting from interdependence and care, and repair, which is a part of care as well. But also, second, the potential for designing pluriversally, meaning by that designing with a profound awareness that design takes place and contributes to the creation of a largely homogeneous, hegemonic world system, whatever you want to call it, heteropatriarchal, capitalist, white supremacist world system, whatever, there are many ways to name it. Sometimes we name it a one world world. This is from British sociologist John Law, a world that is made of a single world, capitalistic, competitive, aggressive markets, all these different things. And hence, that civilizational project of modernity that can be timed historically, and we'll skip that part for now, has been spreading worldwide, conquering ever more territories, occupying not only physically, but ontologically also other ways of worlding, including those of the second world and the third world, as also Anna referred to for the case of the former centrally planned economies that they used to be called. Okay, and not completely, of course. We know that the occupation is never complete. So how do we characterize this system, this dominant system? This is going to be very quick and dirty, very schematic, but I think it will give you an idea for what I mean about the complexity of the background that is at hand. First, philosophically, it is made up of a dualistic ontology, an ontology that separates humans from non-humans, anthropocentrism, mind from body and subject from object, rationalism, us from them, colonialism, the secular from the sacred, secularism, and so forth. Second, this is connected to what wonderful Jamaican philosopher Sylvia Wynter calls a mono-humanist notion of the human. The human as naturally secular, liberal, bourgeois, and Western, rational, competitive, and so forth. A bioeconomic man, she also calls it, and she gives the genealogy of this man over the last 500 years, within which we all are trapped, so to speak, and we move around trying to find other ways of being human within that context of the monohumanist liberalism. Third, it's characterized also by a liberal politics at home and a colonialist politics abroad, imperialism. Fourth, is characterized by an objectivizing and calculated rationality and form of knowledge. Fifth, a view of the economy as disembedded, naturally disembedded from the rest of social and natural life. Ecological economics talks about that. Political economy talks about that as well. and ruled by a allegedly free market, self-regulated markets. Fifth, or sixth, sorry, an ecology that separates humans from non-humans and that gives primacy of the humans over the non-humans, and a cosmos as inert and as the inert background for human action. And finally, and very importantly for today's conjuncture, an approach to energy as unlimited support for material infrastructures for maintaining the civilizational project characterized by all of the above features. So most of this wouldn't exist in the way it exists today without energy, including cities. This is the argument that has been wonderfully been developed by Elisa Iturbe. Some of you might know who she is, architect at Cooper Union, a carbon form of modernity and a carbon form of the city that says that this carbon, the fossil fuel industry pervades everything that has been done on the city and about the city, the norms and forms of the city. So this is the background within which critical design studies and all of the social practices today, transition practices, pluriversal practices take place, and is against this ontological occupation by this model that we can aim with our strategies and praxis of designing and otherwise to reoccupy then territories and places and communities and spaces and cities and so forth. Okay, so second part, and this is going to be quick. I think I have about 8 minutes left. That should be enough. A few things about the 5 topics that I mentioned, referring to different chapters in the book. Solidarity and mutualism is central to the book, of course. And so I was thinking that solidarity is the political expression of mutualism. I like solidarity. I mean, I come from Latin America. Latin America is all about solidarity. I mean, we cannot live without invoking, we cannot engage in politics without invoking solidarity in different ways. And mutualism also is a practice of interdependence. So Ubuntu, the Southern African concept of Ubuntu, I am because you are, I am because all of us exist, is precisely a statement of that different principle of reality, which is radical relationality or interdependence, as opposed to the principle of separation or dualism from modernity, which is an illusion. Nothing exists separate from anything else. Nothing pre-exists that conditions that constitute it. So we are all intermeshed, entangled, and so forth, everything, including ancestors and spirits and non-human beings and so forth. So solidarity and mutualism are hugely important for 2 tasks: reconciliation and relocalization. The re of social life, rebuilding communities, reweaving communities, creating new kinds of communities that we don't know yet how they're going to look like, especially in the intermeshment with the digital, and relocalizing most economic practices like food production, for instance, but dwelling, learning, and so forth can be relocalized. Second point, the emphasis on local economies. I really like the fact that there is a defense of local economic building without apologies. In the entanglement with capitalism, they are not saying that they're purely non-capitalist or socialist or revolutionary. They are what they are, and each case is different. Taking the clue from Gibson Graham's wonderful deconstruction of capitalocentrism, and what they mean by that is that all economic analysis, including Marxist left political economy, reduce all other forms of economy to being secondary or unable to counter capitalism. And what Gibson Graham suggests as well, that is captured well in the book, is that we have a span of a diverse economic practices, which some of which are capitalist, some of which are alternative capitalist, some of them are capitalist, but not only capitalist, and so forth. And this, one of the most wonderful examples we find of this is Quipu, by Mercedes' paper that you had a taste of in her brief presentation, in which this local economy really is not only a hybrid economy that joins and articulates very carefully, weaves together the digital and the physical, the place-based and the cyberspace, but in doing so contributes to build community economies, to reweave the relational fabric of life, of communal life. It is a solidarity economy we can think. I think it raises huge questions. I mean, this paper, I could say much more about that. But for instance, in what ways it reopens the question of what are markets today? We have again a capital-centric view of markets. But there are many other views of markets, and we could go back to the work of, for instance, especially Carl Polanyi and Fernand Braudel on markets before capitalist markets, how they were, and how that enables us and gives us tools for rethinking the kinds of markets that are emerging today, entangled with capitalism, but never completely defined by capitalism, but having also their own logics and their own rationalities. The question of value and distribution, key question in the history of political economy. What is value today? How even exchange value in Quipu, for instance, could be considered a form of use value. It's not exchange value for profit only, but also for reweaving community and race-centered community. Okay, again, much more to say about that, but I'll leave it at that for now. And move to questions about the scale and the digital. These are crucial questions today, maybe the most crucial. There's a lot of discussion in geography about scale today, about how to move away from conventional notions of scale, what a feminist geographer calls the phallic verticality of a scale, the global penetrating the national, penetrating the regional, penetrating the global and the household. Moving away from that to views of scales from below, that through rhizomatic expansion, and the rhizome is a new metaphor, of course, emergence, mycelium. I mean, there's a whole series of metaphors, mostly from biological sciences, that are being borrowed to convey a different sense of the power of a different kind of scaling. That is not a scaling up in the traditional sense, but a scaling out horizontally, radiating, building self-organizing meshworks or transformative alternatives from below. Okay, this is an open question actually to me in both social theory and in activist practice. And I'm glad that architects and designers are focusing also on this question today. And finally, art, as I said, last but not least, and this, again, Rashmi and Jules already talked about this, and I'll refer to Marisa's contributions, the wonderful contributions, the Nanny Van and the Care Force One, her work with domestic workers movements and alliances, and the rich panoply of practices that she was able to co-design with the women with whom she was working, including many artistic practices, not only audio novellas and graphics and music and dance, rituals, embodied rituals, but highlight the role of the body and the embodiment and locality and place-basedness, which is not the same as being place-bound. Being place-based but not place-bound is the condition of communities today. It's hugely important in this connection. Maybe I'll add something to this, which is that all communities today are obviously open and local and translocal at the same time, and they are hybrid communities. They are hybrid of physical and biophysical spaces and connections, but also of the digital. And that's a condition that comes out very clearly in the book, and there's a lot of potential for that, without minimizing the risks of digital technologies and algorithmic rationality and algorithms of oppression, you know, the expression, to recolonize new forms of the digital that are being placed at the service of these local communities. So, but just to say that the connection between arts and technology is going to be hugely important in creating new conditions for being human. The wonderful work of Chinese philosopher Yuk Hui, A-Y-K-H-U-I, most of you probably have heard about him, especially his book, Art and Cosmotechnics, is an instantiation of this idea. It's a somewhat difficult book. It requires a background in philosophy, especially Heideggerian phenomenology and beyond. But I think it's worth trying to understand the connection of art and technology and different ways of thinking, and hence, and with this end, the possibility of creating new conditions for being human. Let me just recommend 2 readings, especially for teaching. There are great teaching tools as well that go along very well with design and solidarity, both in theme and in orientation. And these are the last two books by Ezio Mancini, most of you know him, Politics of the Everyday and Livable Proximity. The subtitle of Livable Proximity is Ideas for a City That Cares. If you haven't seen it, that really is a really good book. And very close to you in Boston, the work, and I think for Jules, it would be great partners for your work in East Boston. The work of the Design Studio for Social Interventions. Many of you know probably Kenneth Bailey is one of the main people in the group, but there is a wonderful group of people. And their book, Ideas, Arrangements, Effects, about rearranging the social, is also a wonderful contribution that goes very well with this, with Design and Solidarity. So thank you very much again, and congratulations to the authors, to the editors in particular, for this wonderfully accomplished book. Thank you.
All right. Okay. Is this a? Can you? Every like 2 seconds until we get this slide. Right. Okay. I was also told to hurry up because the bar closes at 8. So, all right. Wait.
Oh, sorry.
Okay. Every 2 seconds. All right. Good evening. I would like to talk about architecture and social action. Oh, I need this, right? Great. And I bring these ideas in reference to current approaches, which we don't need to take for granted. What we see in schools and in the profession and in our discourse, an interest, I would say, or an acknowledgement and responsibility and commitment to social issues. I think there is a motivation among students, among professionals, among scholars, to find ways to use design skills or to use the medium of architecture, right, to address social issues, to critique systems of power. And this maybe has led in a way to an expanded idea of what architecture design is. But at the same time, I want to maybe point to a potential problem that we might be neglecting something that is embedded in architecture, which can be a form of action. And this is what I would like to talk about. I would like to talk about architecture when the architectural work is an alternative to an existing reality. And I mean architecture here in the simplest term of physical design of building an urban space. And I would say that if we understand architecture as an alternative to an existing reality, then that means that that alternative is derived from a critique of the existing, right, based on observation. And this critique, whether it's social, economic, political, can create in a way the grounds or reading of context or reading of sight, right, that can enable us then to propose kind of an alternative. If we remain and build the same, basically I would say we really don't need architects. We need builders, but we don't really need architects. So I'm going to give 2 examples from my work on how this process from a critique can inform an architectural project. I can take it from here. All right. So about 20 years ago, I worked on a project with Eyal Weizmann. We called it a civilian occupation. It was an exhibition, which is a great medium to use our design skills. And it basically looked at Jewish settlements in the West Bank and kind of claimed through maps and through photographs and through analysis that the occupation is activated by civilians, really by suburbia, onto kind of the territory, which creates this kind of systems of supervision. This was a research work. It was an exhibition. It was a book. It involved mapping. It's one component, an example. We use our design skills to critique an existing power system, in this case, the occupation, one of the kind of longest, unfortunately, and successful, unfortunately, occupations of a country over a people. And this came out as an exhibition, etc. Years later, 10 years later, 12 years later, I did a competition for the National Library of Israel, as you see here, which won first prize. And this work relied on this understanding of that same territory, while the library was in what we call the Green Line, was in Israel's sovereign areas. It was based on an understanding of the context, of the site, of the city of Jerusalem as a space of barriers, as a space of segregation, as a space of walls, right? So here, when thinking about National Library, the motivation was, well, can we completely remove the idea of segregation and barriers within the architectural project and think of a wholly horizontal building with no walls, just with a series of courtyards and spaces and kind of free moving within that, right? And I will get to this if we have time, but I truly believe that the power of designers and architects specifically is in the plan and section. And this is where we, within society, this is something that we can bring and we have that perhaps other disciplines are not as poised to deal with. The project of the library then reconfigures what a library is at the same time and transforms that idea into a kind of a civic space. It has traditional connotations in terms of historic references, of pools, of gathering. It has organizational proposals of how you access spaces, spaces that are open 24/7, spaces that are exhibition, spaces for reading, etc. And it sets these in a rather conventional typology of courtyards, courtyards where light comes from above, from the side, and kind of echoes with that traditions in Jerusalem. Oh, I also get that blackout. Right. The next project really refers to work that I've been doing here at MIT and started with a seminar called Collectives in 2016 that questions that divide between the public and the private. And questions, can we begin to imagine that line between private and public property, between ownership, as a kind of space of multiple or gradients of conditions. And so the main kind of question that we've been asking every year with the students, and this is from a few years back, right, is how architecture and urbanism can respond and promote forms of collectivity, and how we can occupy that space between the private and the public. One project that I bring back here, and we actually did here at MIT with this fantastic group of students from the SMArchS program, from the SMArchS program, was in Rwanda, a country of 1,000 hills, as they call it. And the primary project was to rethink their village system. These are rural villages with need for services, with need for infrastructure. So the primary task was, how do we find a way to think between the private homes and create these collective programs and integrate them into the village, right? So you see a series of collective programs that find their way in this kind of central spine, and some are run collectively, but are kind of serving the community. So with housing, to bring other components, and this was then further developed with the generous support of Adele, which is here with us, and was kind of shown in Biennales. But the beauty of the project is that we really managed to, as a group, to go to Rwanda, where their housing authority was building these houses, and look at this kind of plan. And you would, in this beautiful rural landscape, you build all these houses cramped next to each other with low quality bricks that actually requires more mortar and rails and bars. And we said, well, maybe we can develop a different kind of house. And also, in that sense, one house can do a lot, because architecture, I think, really is demonstrative. It's not here necessarily to solve problems but it's here to inspire and show, hey, this could be done like that. So it really is primarily to open and kind of expand our imagination. So our group came to a small village near Kigali, and we started learning, the MIT students, the Rwanda architecture students, learning how to build with brick. Masons taught students and villagers a kind of a skill. Villagers were hired and paid to build the house for their future neighbor while learning these skills. So the whole idea of building for the other, right? And so convincing in a way, can we save, this is the head of the Rwanda Housing Authority, can we make some spaces between the bricks and save money on that? He was not convinced. Students are exploring how to build a wall, right? And how to do that. Can we run this? And here you see a kind of time lapse where a whole lot of people are not doing much. They are just putting a brick, taking a brick, putting a brick. The whole discussion around how are we going to build this house? How do agreeing on kind of the pattern, right? The bringing together of people around that. So that in itself, you know, bringing that to the village and this kind of act of designing, and it is not compromising anything of the design. And there's still a design team. There's still design intentions here. And eventually, yes, not in 2 weeks, but in 3 weeks, a house gets built and incorporates some of those ideas. For example, like a porch that you could use as a shop or you could use as an extension of your space. Semi-public, semi-private, right? This kind of in-between. You could decide to close it, to keep it open, right? And also the backside, which is the building and the lot are one, so the open spaces are included within the property and not kind of in between. And then kind of also this kind of creation of this gradient or this kind of perforated surface that kind of mitigates between inside and outside. And so this single house does kind of present or bring those ideas and offer an alternative. And I will quickly leave you with that. Thank you.
Okay, I was really fast forward.
You did. So actually, sorry, hold on. The book, well, first of all, thank you all for coming. And I'm under pressure to close out the evening, to keep you from falling asleep, and to get us out so you can have a drink before the bartender goes at 8. So this book comes out of the exhibition that we did, the Venice Biennale, and it was really created as a conversation between the architectural component and the filmmaking component. So you'll see.
Design is a world-constructing agency. We design the world, and the world designs us back. Now, if what we have designed is so problematic, the question becomes, can design be reoriented? And I know we have to design things, and we have to create dwellings, but the challenge is how do we recreate those dwellings in a way that don't make us more isolated than we already are, but enable reconnections.
So historically, Black women have played a critical role in building the economic solidarity of their communities. We're really not just reacting against things, we're building spaces, activities, and connections for the long run, helping to build a community that extends beyond ourselves, and that is solidarity.
In order to create the common, it's something that's neither public nor private property, but is shared and collectively decided. That requires a design structure.
building solidarity for workers means building spaces for our communities to flourish and express our values.
So in my work, I scale from two-dimensional works on paper to architectural and civic scale projects. This is a project that we did with a group of us, including Maria. And in Mexico City, that was created from wood recycled from Mexico City's first roller coaster. And this amate paper, which is a paper craft that comes from both Mesoamerican and Chinese paper cutting traditions. And the perforations are said to invite the past to come through, which is why it has these associations with the Day of the Dead. And as somebody who's Chinese and Ecuadorian, I feel that this is an invitation to remix these heritages and consider how it is and what pasts we let come through and how big that aperture or abertura, the opening or portal or threshold is. And the other thing that was interesting about when we were building this pavilion is that when we were installing at 2 in the morning, we were explaining the project to a policewoman who was on patrol. And when she heard that it was made from wood recycled from the roller coaster, she hugged the structure because the roller coaster is this larger than life charismatic object that is significant to residents of that city. In my work, I'm really interested in persona and charismatic objects and these larger-than-life structures that can animate or inspire or galvanize us in different ways, including Bilu Bandido, which is a masked bandit who eats stories, and we all love a good story, but this guy eats them. And he is so hungry for stories that he pesters little kids until they offer him and nourish him with stories that they've written. So he is, as Sarah introduced, he is more exciting for people than Santa Claus in Honduras. And the project has traveled to other communities as well. So other characters include these animal sculptures that were built during the WPA era of public housing, during the building of public housing, during a moment when we valued art and design in the 1930s and 40s, and when artists and architects and designers proudly identified as part of what was called the Cultural Front and the rebuilding of America. And a persona that I play is Aphrodite, the goddess of love and copper, which is a way for me to address and explore questions about mineral extraction or mineral dependencies and questions about the disproportionate toll that the extractive economy takes on women and children in the global South disproportionately. And so this question of masquerade and this exploration of otherness and alterity intersects the work that I do in co-designing creative media and public art with low-wage workers, new immigrant families, and public housing residents. A chapter in the book is about this journey that I've taken with the National Domestic Workers Alliance, which is an alliance of 10,000 nannies, housekeepers, and caregivers in various mobile studios. This is the nanny van where I packed my newborn and a filmmaker, and we traveled across the country unfolding into public spaces. And I'm going to share with you this clip from one of the organizers and why art and design is essential to the movement.
This is literally where the rubber meets the road, right? We passed a law, but this is only the beginning. Now we have to do our work to really get out there and educate employers, educate workers about their rights, and we can do it. I mean, creativity is really key to being able to reach people as well. So if you are just very grim and determined and you just talk about all the horrible things, you know, no one wants to be a part of that, really. So you need to bring in creativity to address those really important, urgent issues, but doing it in a way that really brings a lot of humanity to it.
Nani Van es algo espectacular, desde el color hasta todo lo que tiene, como tiene muchos dibujos que se parece como la Mujer Maravilla, que eso somos nosotros, ¿verdad? Somos las Mujeres Maravillas.
Conversation over the evening, we've been talking about the different ways in which care and mutualistic initiatives are really essential part of our effective, but also the ways in which we derive either socioeconomic strength and security as well as pleasure. And you know, one term that we raised in the book is this, that Rafi and I created, was this question of plurieconomies, which is a way of talking about and surfacing the many different economies in which we already participate and how to surface them and properly valorize them. Dolores Hayden writes about the 19th century material feminists who were exploring how to mutualize care and housing and reconsider this, this question about economy and oikos, or the economy of the home. And Dolores Hayden reminds us that, for example, these 19th century materialist feminists and this movement, which lasted for a few centuries, suffered a decisive blow under the McCarthy era and the Red Scare, as well as the suburbanization of the United States, which was led by US policymakers as well as the car industry. And so we have this legacy of housing isolation and the toll it takes on public health. You know, we are experiencing right now the care crisis, in which there's questions about the economic precarity of older and disabled adults as well as domestic workers. And the question that Rafi and I raise, and you will have to read about it in the book because we don't have time this evening, is how to improve and use art, architecture, and design to improve on the social determinants of health, to rethink this question. And perhaps what I'll do is I'll lead you with a teaser. I turned to Rafi with this question about how to, this question I just posed. And we turned to Ernst Valerie, who was at the time just finishing an MLK fellowship here. And we created what is called Care House, which is the US's first care-based co-housing project, which is centering quality care in homes for older and disabled adults, anchoring the needs of caregivers and their children. It is insisting on, against the kind of very institutional and sterile notions of senior care in the United States, we are insisting that art is integral to well-being and dignity. And we are creating this model with this idea of sustainable urban development. Shall I end there? Okay. Thank you so much for coming. I think that, so we were going to have questions, but I think that we probably more want drinks, right? Yeah.
All right, talk about joy, expertise, transition design.
Thank you.
She said she'd only fuck with me if I would let her.
Good job.
I ain't no hater, honey. Go ahead, get your cheddar.